Why is there a space before the zero on a ruler, and what is it for? Look around your desk and you'll probably find a ruler. It's one of the simplest tools ever created, and most of us have been using one since childhood. We rely on it to draw straight lines, measure objects, and complete school or work projects without ever giving its design a second thought. But if you examine a ruler carefully, you may notice something unusual. On many rulers, the printed scale doesn't begin at the very edge. Instead, there is a small blank section before the zero mark. It might be only a few millimeters, or sometimes close to a centimeter, but it's clearly intentional. At first glance, this empty space seems unnecessary. Why waste perfectly good material? Why not start measuring from the edge itself? The truth is that this tiny gap solves several important problems and is the result of clever engineering, practical manufacturing, and thoughtful design. The first reason is durability. A ruler's edge experiences the most wear and tear during its lifetime. It gets dropped onto hard floors, scraped across rough surfaces, shoved into backpacks, and pressed against sharp objects. Eventually, the corners become chipped or rounded. Imagine if the zero mark were printed exactly at that edge. Even the slightest damage would change the ruler's starting point. A chip measuring only half a millimeter could make every future measurement inaccurate. For casual use, this might not seem significant, but in engineering, architecture, woodworking, sewing, or scientific work, tiny errors can add up quickly. By placing the zero mark slightly away from the vulnerable edge, manufacturers protect the measurement scale from everyday damage. Even if the corner wears down over years of use, the zero line remains accurate. The second reason comes from the manufacturing process. Modern factories produce rulers in enormous quantities. Large sheets of plastic, wood, or metal are first printed with measurement markings and then cut into individual rulers. Making thousands of perfectly precise cuts every hour is not easy. Even advanced machines have tiny tolerances. If the blade cuts just a fraction of a millimeter too far, it could remove part of the zero line and ruin the product. Leaving a blank margin before zero gives factories a safety buffer. Small cutting errors affect only the unused space instead of the measuring scale itself. This reduces waste, improves quality control, and allows rulers to be produced more efficiently without sacrificing accuracy. It's accurate. There is also an educational advantage. Children who use a ruler for the first time often assume that measuring begins at the physical edge of the object. However, the correct reference point is the printed zero mark. The empty space visually separates the edge from the scale and reminds users that numbers, not plastic or wood, determine where measurement begins. In classrooms around the world, this subtle design feature quietly teaches proper measuring habits without requiring extra instructions. Interestingly, not all rulers include this gap. Some precision rulers place zero exactly at the edge so users can measure from a flat surface without adjustment. Others include both edge markings and internal zero lines, depending on their intended purpose. Professional machinists and engineers often inspect their measuring tools regularly because any damage to the edge can affect accuracy. In those cases, careful handling becomes especially important. If your ruler begins right at the edge, there is a simple trick when the edge becomes damaged. Instead of starting at zero, align your object with another visible mark, such as the 1 centimeter mark, and subtract that value from the final reading. For example, if the object starts at 1 centimeter and ends at 9.7 centimeters, its actual length is 8.7 centimeters. This method helps compensate for worn or chipped edges and is commonly taught in science laboratories. The empty space before zero may look insignificant, but it represents thoughtful problem solving. It protects the ruler from everyday wear. It makes manufacturing more reliable and economical. It helps students learn proper technique, and it preserves accuracy over years of repeated use. Perhaps the most surprising lesson is that good design often goes unnoticed. The features we never question are sometimes the result of decades or even centuries of refinement and practical experience. So the next time you pick up a ruler, take a closer look at that blank space before the zero. What appears to be empty is actually one of the smartest parts of the entire tool. A quiet reminder that even the simplest objects can hide ingenious ideas.